Okay.
Fantastic. Good morning, everybody. I'm Dana Markson from Mind Soother Therapy Center and also from Rockstar Practice. And I welcome you to Coping Skills Tool Belt. This is our workshop series, episode 4, the Anti-Anxiety Toolkit, with a very dear colleague / helper of mine, which you'll find out about in a second, Melissa Tears. So I'm really pleased to be offering this workshop series for you every Friday at 11 a.m., 11 to 12 a.m., with a different guest expert each week. I've put in the chat, if you scroll all the way to the top, if you would like to find out more about these workshops, you can join our Facebook group at Rockstar Practice, and I've put the link to that in the chat already. Scroll all the way to the top. And I look forward to bringing a different guest expert each week to you. So welcome, everyone. So I want to introduce Melissa. How I met Melissa was about 5 or 6 years ago. I was having a very prolonged issue with extreme insomnia. I couldn't fall asleep until 3, 4, 5 o'clock in the morning for about 1.5 years. And it was really disrupting my life. And I had tried every possible thing. And I was Google searching, found Melissa online. I was actually leaving for Europe that night with my husband for a 2-week vacation. He was going to be working and I was going to join him. And I called Melissa, I got an appointment, I went to the city, I did a 1-hour session with her using some of the techniques she's going to offer you today. And believe it or not, never struggled with with insomnia again. So that night we got to Europe. I took the red eye. I slept on the plane, got to Europe the next day, and never had an issue since. I use these techniques every single day of my life personally and offer them to my clients as well. And so I'm really pleased to welcome her here. Just a reminder, this workshop is for you, the therapist. This is not a clinical training. These are techniques that you can use for yourself to improve calm, to stay grounded, to reduce anxiety, particularly during this difficult time. So just a brief blurb on Melissa. She is the founder of the Center for Integrative Hypnosis with a private hypnosis practice in New York City and teaches classes in integrative hypnosis, neuro-linguistic psychology, and mental health coaching. And you can tell us more about you, Melissa. I'm very pleased and proud to welcome you today.
Thanks. What I thought I would share, so yeah, I'm in New York City. I've got my center in Chelsea, which has been basically on hold, on pause. And like you, I'm really grateful to be able to continue working, virtually. And I have my, Zoom classes now, and my supervision is totally on Zoom with my students. I've been training therapists for over 18 years. I've been doing this work for maybe 22 years. Anything really in the mind field, I kind of soak up and integrate. That's why my brand of hypnosis is integrative, because I'm always learning, always pulling. I've got a class, Coaching the Unconscious Mind, which is, how do we integrate all of this stuff with what we know about, polyvagal theory, embodied cognition, and priming, and, how can we get a more congruent, holistic change going on, where we kind of take into account our clients' conscious, unconscious, energetic, biochemical, neurological state. I've been doing a lot on practical neuroscience these days. I have a book on that, as well as many books on kind of what fascinates me in this field. You have my little anti-anxiety toolkit, which is what I'm gonna share some of today. Sorry, I'm just trying to get my hot tea out of the way. It's a little book that I give to all of my clients. It's part of what happens with them when they come to see me. And so even though I know that you stress that this is techniques for you all to help you so that you can better help your clients, I am going to suggest that so many of these techniques are so simple and so easy to share, especially virtually with your clients, that you might find yourself just throwing them out there. Sometimes a good pattern interrupt with the way that your sessions go with certain particular clients is to say, hey, I've just learned some of these techniques. I see you're feeling anxious. Let's give them a shot. And that right there is a way of just interjecting maybe some affect regulation tools. So when I work with clients, I work on a few different levels. And the first level is what I call a self-directed neuroplasticity. Right? It's how do we help our clients to help themselves when they're not with you. And so it's a set of these techniques that are basically used to interrupt a habituated pattern and foster new neural connections, new neural pathways. So that's why it's self-directed neuroplasticity. I'm not sure if you're still with me here because my screen is doing some crazy stuff.
I know. Whoever just screen shared, please don't do that. I have to figure out.
You can still hear me. Now we're looking at your email.
All right. Well, okay. Thank you.
No worries.
That's a new one. I don't know how to fix that, but I'm going to work on that for next week.
Yeah. You can actually go into your settings, and there's privacy settings, and it can say, who do you want to be able to share? And you should, by the way, fix that before your next thing, because the whole Zoom bombing thing, that's how they do it. Yeah. They get in and share.
You know what? I had it on for group last night because we all share with each other, and I forgot to change it. So thank you for the
reminder. No worries.
We're going to roll with it.
Right. So the set of techniques I'm going to share for you today, I actually teach to almost all of my clients. Not only are they anti-anxiety techniques, but I use them to pattern interrupt. So they'll get you out of one state and into something better. And whether it's a compulsive state, a craving state, a frustration state, stress, anxiety, it interrupts. And the way that I share this with my clients is, this is your habit road, right? If they come to me with a habit, regardless if that habit is something like smoking or, whatever, overeating, to me, any habituated pattern, and that's anxiety, that's habits of feeling, habits of thinking, habits of doing. I explain it like this: you're going down your habit road in the brain, and we're going to put a roadblock up. That roadblock is designed to segue out and to create detours and different alternative paths. And I'm sharing this frame with you guys because you're all mental health workers. And so although I could just simplify it, if you were a group of healthcare workers, like I've been volunteering my time with different groups, so to give healthcare workers a skill set, I wouldn't be going through this whole explanation with them. But for you, if you're going to share some of these, or even if you want to break one of your own habituated patterns, whether it's worry or anything like that, think of every time you start to go down that road, whether it starts with internal dialogue or whatever, you start to feel it and you segue out using one of the techniques I'm going to share. I want you to think in your mind that what you're actually doing, neurologically speaking, is interrupting a certain neural network and fostering new neural connections. And, before long, you can actually rewire habits faster than you think. And I might suggest the work of Jeffrey Schwartz, who works with OCD, one of the kind of pioneers in this kind of self-directed neuroplasticity frame. So that's the first level of the work that I do. And the second level, just to give you an overview of my work, is where I work with my clients to kind of neutralize external and internal triggers that set these patterns off. And I use different forms of hypnotic techniques for like therapeutic memory reconsolidation and changing early emotional implicit memories. And my third level is one of insight, right? It's providing a deeper trance state for people to get a little bit more clarity as to the why of the patterns, why of the issues. But that's a quick overview because you're therapists, so that you understand that there's this piece. And although these techniques will stop a craving or stop anxiety, you can utilize them in real strategic ways to to just rewire a lot of patterns. Anyway, we'll just start. So we're all in this crazy world right now. And as Dana was saying earlier, you know, we're in these screens. And so the first one I want to share with you is, I think, vital for our mental health in general, but certainly as it relates to the habituated form of attention that we have to pay on the screen. I am using a much bigger screen than I typically am attached to because I'm always on my iPad, which is a smaller screen, or a phone, which is even smaller. And what that does, there was this amazing research study that when you're on a smaller screen, you can so much more easily access the kind of anxiety states, stress states, things like that. And it's very challenging for the kind of confidence states and things like that. And that really has to do with embodied cognition, something I teach a lot about. What that means is the hunched physiological state that we get when we're looking at smaller and smaller screens is collapsing us in and forcing us to use foveal vision. Foveal vision is that almost tunnel vision. And it is the vision that is related to the sympathetic arousal, right? So it's when we are threatened, we go into that foveal vision. And so one of the things that is a part of a toolkit that I teach everybody in my office, especially now, is to do the opposite, is to shift out into a peripheral vision, into peripheral field, which naturally starts to ease you out of sympathetic arousal into parasympathetic response. But more importantly, for our purposes, it stops internal dialogue. So, sorry. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to guide you through that. And we'll just use the screen as a good example. Normally in my office, I have clients find a spot to look at. And then I teach them how to do this a couple of times. And then we use their trigger. Right? So if someone has a fear of even elevators, you know, I show them how to go into an elevator and then immediately shift out into peripheral. Stop the internal dialogue and stop the biochemical rush of stress hormones. And anyway, so let's do it. Sorry, I'm used to being able to see faces, so I'm just going to hallucinate that you're all, you know, smiling along with me, and now we're going to
following you. You're doing a great job. We're
go into the second class. Thanks, honey. So what I want you to do is just to find one spot. If you're all watching me, I guess it could be my face. And as you allow your eyes to kind of focus in, without moving your eyes, I want you to begin to expand out. Kind of become aware of the space around your screen, expanding even further, right, without moving those eyes, so that you can see the walls on either side of you, expanding out even more as if you could be aware of the space behind you. And bring it back into focus. Take a moment and notice how you feel. Notice what that was like. We're going to do it again because everything is better with practice. So taking a moment, once again, you find a focal point. Remember, collapsing in is foveal vision, and it's typically associated with stress states, right? So then you just kind of ease. It's almost like you can soften. Carlos Castaneda used to call this stopping the world because it stops internal dialogue. So now expanding out beyond the edges of whatever screen you're using, the space above you, below you, to the sides, expanding out even more as if you could be aware of the walls on either side, expanding out beyond the walls, even imagining that, and all the space behind you. And then you bring it back in. So, what was that like? I know I can't hear from you, but maybe I can in the chat. Let's see. Yeah, Jeffrey Schwartz. By the way, I'm catching up on it's Jeffrey Schwartz. He wrote the first book, which was amazing, is a little dense, and that was The Mind and the Brain. I'm going to tell you to go for a book called You Are Not Your Brain. I wrote a book called Keeping the Brain in Mind with one of my students that kind of goes over his four-step protocol, but maps it across to the four-step protocol that I teach therapists. I also have Integrative Hypnosis was my first book, in case you're interested in that one. And if you work with kids or teens, I have a newer one, Integrative Hypnosis for kids and teens. So let's see, neck position change, body grounded, shoulders opened, yes. Okay. Oh, the other thing I mentioned was Carlos Castaneda. Maybe I'm just showing my age. Anthropologist, right? I believe he wrote a bunch of books that were way out there. Some of you might know what I'm talking about. And then I see very much like Yoga Nidra, yeah, they share some common themes, right? In that soft, focus, open state. Everything's slowed down, yes, exactly. Now I've worked with people that are like, severe OCD, and I just should clarify, I'm not a licensed therapist, and so I work with other people's patients. That's OPP, remember that song? Dating myself again. So I work in conjunction with, basically their psychiatrist in order to work with people that have been clinically diagnosed because I'm really just a hypnosis teacher. I teach people these techniques. So when I remember working with someone who had such a nonstop internal looping, and that was their thing. And when I taught this to him, he almost fell off the chair. It was like, for the first time, to have no internal dialogue was such a foreign landscape for this person that it was almost like a vacuum that he fell into. I'll never forget that moment because I thought he was going to fall off the chair. So it's a very different state if you're not used to it. Now, I should share with you, this is one I lean on all the time. So I will do this if I'm walking down the street and I start ruminating. The past few years in this country has been quite triggering for me personally. I used to be very politically active. My past life was a punk rock musician who used to do punk rock the boat. So I'm a little hooked in politically. And so these years have been challenging. And if I'm walking to my office and I have to help a bunch of people, and yet I'm having these internal dialogue loops and homicidal fantasies, that can't be good for people. So if I'm walking down the street and I start that internal dialogue looping, the back of the person's head in front of me becomes the focal point, and I shift out and shut up. That is my new mantra the past couple of years. Shift out and shut up, personally, for myself. If I am on a plane and it starts to get crazy turbulent, then the screen in front of me becomes the focal point. I shift out, shut up. If I've already had 2 brownies and I'm thinking, maybe I'll go for a third, the brownies become the focal point. I shift out and shut up. You can't keep anxiety going or a craving going without internal dialogue. It's really challenging. And the truth is, you've got less than 90 seconds of a biochemical wash before you can, that's why people who can be mindful, oh, I'm feeling this. 90 seconds later, they get to choose a different state. And not all of us are that skilled, but this is a cheat. It's a quick way to shift out. Now I'll check out some
So
of which.
Melissa, someone had a question. I just want to confirm. Catherine would like to know, what is this technique called? Could you please remind us?
So I call this shifting into peripheral vision. Carlos Castaneda had something similar way back in the 60s, and he called it stopping the world. My friend John Overdurf, he calls it his coaching state. So there's all different names, but basically what you're doing is shifting into peripheral vision. So I just call it that. Make sense?
Yes,
But
very
yeah,
good.
everything's slowed down. So this is, somebody said foveal vision. Foveal vision is the opposite. Foveal vision collapses in, right? Peripheral shifts out. Make sense?
Yes, beautiful. Thank you.
Yeah, the more you play with this one, this one to me took a while. I never shut up inside my head. So it really took a while till I felt comfortable enough where I can do this teaching a class. So if I'm teaching a big class of therapists and I'm doing a trance induction, a hypnosis induction, I like to keep an eye on everybody. If I have a big room I need to be aware of, shifting into peripheral vision allows me to see the more subtle changes, right? The nonverbal communication, which is where my skill set lies, is, noticing when people hitch their breath a little bit or shift, or the muscles relax subtly, or their breathing shifts. These are things that I pick up almost unconsciously at this point. And it's easier to do that in peripheral vision. One other thing that's really useful, you're all therapists here, is to shift into peripheral vision whenever I want to pick up what the nonverbals that my client is giving me without my filtering, as much as that's possible, but without my assumptions about what I think they mean. See, as soon as I start to get into my stuff, what I think they are saying, I'm missing some parts, and I'm, overlaying my filtering system. So a lot of times when working with a client, I will systematically shift in and out of this so that I can better get their more pure form of their unconscious markers without my interpretation. Anyway, so it's one that you want to practice because it has many different useful facets. Yeah, to be more present, sure, shift out, and shush dialogue for patients. I like that. It's a softer, more therapeutic statement than shift out and shut up.
You call that a reframe, right? I like it.
Yeah, and if I'm being totally honest, for me, it's shift out and shut the fuck up. That's my interpretation. It's my
for yourself, right?
Yeah.
Alicia had a question. Do you do it with clients at the same time, or do you do it while the client is talking?
Well, both. Both. So when I'm teaching the client, I always, teach therapists to go first. And that's whatever state you really want to elicit. It's easier for you to elicit it if you're in it. We have mirror neurons. We have, a very social brain that likes to mirror. And we have our heart rate. Well, there's a bunch of unconscious systems that will sync up. And so when I'm teaching it, I do it because I can also see peripherally when they hit it, when they kind of go into that state. But I'll also do it when they're talking and I just want to be I want to clear my filters. So both.
Beautiful. Thank you.
Yeah. So let's move on to another fun one. All right. This next one is another one that I give to almost every client because once again, it not only interrupts anxiety, it interrupts almost any state that a client is currently in. It's a little more active, which is good because a lot of times anxiety and even depression, funny enough, is an overactivation of a certain area of the brain. And it's on one hemisphere typically. You're using your whole brain all the time. I get that. But there's an overactivation that occurs typically in the right hemisphere. And so by spreading the blood flow out, and I know that I think you had someone here who was sharing some EMDR techniques. So
Yeah.
this has some commonalities there in that we're using bilateral stimulation, but it's a lot easier to give your clients this, right? Rather than the more formal stuff. So I'm going to tilt this a little bit. You might lose the top of my head, but I'm also going to grab something because I didn't even think to do that. Hold on.
So everybody, if you have a pen or something next to you, a pen could be.
Yeah, typically a water bottle, a pen. I always have, I used to have little balls at my office. When I work with kids, they get to choose one. And this is great for everybody. And it will also stop a craving, interestingly enough. So in order to really feel it, what I want you to do actually is just allow yourself to access a little bit of anxiety. So that you can feel how interesting it is when this stops it. So just take a moment. What I want you to do is notice where it is, like a SUD scale, 0 to 10. Where would you kind of put this anxiety as you're thinking of it now? And now follow me. So if you can see me, yeah, all right, maybe I'll do this. Right, yeah, no, I've chopped my head off for you, that's not good. So just do this. We're passing it back and forth so that it crosses the midline of the body. And the reason this is working is because that anxiety is primarily on that one side, as I said earlier. And so what we're doing now is we are spreading activity throughout the right brain and left brain and right brain and left brain. When you start spreading blood flow, electrical impulses throughout both hemispheres, what starts to happen is that anxiety can't keep itself together, that anxiety circuit. Now, what's also good about this one is it's active, which activates more of the left hemisphere. So it's a good one. I teach it to kids where they don't even have to have something in their hand. They can do it under their desk, right? So I've watched this stop a panic attack dead in its tracks. I've watched this actually on the playground stop an asthma attack. So it is a good, quick go-to when you need it. So just noticing for a moment. I usually do it for about 35, 40 seconds. I've been talking, so maybe it's over a minute. So let's stop and notice how your body feels. Notice where that number is now. And I'm gonna look at the chat so I can get some feedback. Yeah, this is bilateral stimulation. Wow, went from a 6 to a 2. Wow, felt relief. Yes, I also do this with the clients. And if there's a 2 left, yeah, went down to 0. We like to hear that. Just do it some more. And then here, they're walking out of your office, or they're sitting in their house now with these tools. It takes a minute to share it. Why not, right?
I wanted to add that this is one of the techniques that you shared with me when I came to see you 5 or 6 years ago. And you instructed me to sit by the edge of the bed and do this right before I laid down. And I did it for about a minute. I also did it with my eyes closed, which I thought was really helpful. That worked really well for me. And I just noticed my SUD scale go instantaneously down after about a minute. And then I was able to get into bed in a different state than I had
Yeah.
approached that. It was really helpful.
Good, I'm glad. Do you suggest clients count down when they do this skill or time themselves? No, I just have them do it. until they feel better. You know what I mean? This just allows them to kind of be more proactive. You know, here's the thing. I give, as I said, I typically on the first session with most clients, I'm knocking down some external triggers, but the way that I'm doing that is by using all the different techniques that I share. And so it becomes a tool for me as a practitioner, but then they take it home. Now, obviously, I give them a little book as homework, which has all of the techniques in it. It's easier for me to sit there. I used to just write them down for people, but I'm lazy at heart. So hence that little tiny book was born really out of my laziness. It says, what about combining this technique with the shifting out? Yeah, try it. You know, these are all these are all things that I want you to play with, right? Because so many times my students will come up with a variation I hadn't thought of, or even my clients. I never used this for cravings until I had a client. I'll never forget. He was like in his 60s. He had been like smoking 3 packs of cigarettes every day for, what do they say, like 40 years. And he was like a construction worker guy. And I was just teaching him ways of de-stressing, right? Because I don't take something away from a client without giving something better in its stead. So if the cigarettes were his only form of stress management, it calmed him down, I'm going to make sure that I give him at least 2 or 3 different ways to get out of a stressed state before taking the cigarettes away. This was just to get rid of stress. He came back a week later and said he hadn't smoked. And I said, so what have you been using? I give a bunch of different, what have you been using? What's been helping? And he says, anytime I get a craving, I just throw my keys back and forth and it stops it. And I thought, I hadn't thought of it for stopping craving. And then I had a supervision that I lead supervision with all my students. So a bunch of students came in and I, had them all think of a craving and then do this, and everyone had great results. Now, it seems to me that cravings act like anxiety in the brain, but there's no proof of that. I'm just guessing because it seems to work. And then I started to apply almost all of my anti-anxiety techniques to cravings. And I mean, just because I had this idea in my head that maybe what was happening in the brain was very similar to anxiety. And it seems to pan out, although I have yet to get my hands on an fMRI machine.
Somebody has an interesting question, Melissa, is would you use this with a person that's frustrating you? And I guess my answer is right now, if you're doing online therapy with clients and they can't see your hands, definitely feel free to use bilateral stimulation while you're talking to them, correct? What do you think?
Of course. And shifting out. I mean, I have a different style when I do my sessions. So if a client is frustrating me, first of all, I typically shut them up. If it's not useful, if I'm getting frustrated hearing their story or whatever, I'll say, stop, take a moment, right? Just stop. How do you want to be instead, right? That's how you've been. So that's one of my ways. But the other thing is to actually do this so they can see it. Now they know the techniques, which means they know that I am feeling something. And that too is a great pattern interrupt. I'll tell you with EFT years and years ago, I can remember if I was in the car with my husband and I started tapping, his first response is to say, what did I do? So it became my not so subtle way of making him shut up because I would just start tapping using the meridian technique to get rid of whatever negative state. So sometimes you can do something like that.
Well, it's good modeling when it's appropriate.
Yes, when it's appropriate.
Yes, it could be very, very helpful for both us, the therapist, and the client if we're using it for ourselves and to model it.
Exactly.
The person said she meant more with a frustrating colleague, but yes, I feel like we can.
Even better, even more to start doing it.
I teach it, like you said, for when we're back in school. I've taught many kids to use this under their desk. They usually have a fidget toy or something with them in their hand, and just do it right under the desk, very subtle, and it really helps.
Yep. Yep. It's a good one. So
Yeah.
those are two that are really easy to share. Um, there's another one I want to share. Well, there's a few. We'll see how much we can get done.
Okay.
You're keeping track of time.
I am. We're all good.
So you had mentioned one that when we were first talking, when I got on the call, that you said you use quite often, and I hadn't even thought of that one as something to share, which is the jaw dropping. So I'll share that because it's another way of down regulating the vagus nerve. If you guys don't know about the vagus nerve, you will have a lot of fun diving into that rabbit hole. You might look up polyvagal theory by Stephen Porges, Porges. And to me, it really informs my work because it is, you know, the system that is always paying attention outside of conscious awareness. So because my work is primarily focusing on those systems outside of the cognitive conscious stuff for the most part, downregulating the vagus nerve is something that I do with every client. And there's so many different cool ways to do it. So just a little heads up on why you might like it. I'm assuming you all probably know it, but if you don't, the vagus nerve, there's actually two, but the vagus nerve goes from your brain stem down through your body. Every vital organ, it goes down your lungs, your heart, your gut, and back up. It's how the body tells the brain what it's doing and how the brain tells the body what to do. It's a feedback loop. And there's actually more nerves going from the body to the brain, which we didn't know initially. So it really is an interesting feedback loop. And there's a term that I love that Stephen Porges coined, where he calls it neuroception, which is the perception of your nervous system that's outside of conscious awareness. And when you think about what that means, the vagus nerve is the fight or flight response. It is the freeze response. It is the response that is always looking to protect you, right? And it is the thing that brings most people to therapy, which is, you know, some form of this is at play. And he says that if you think about it, your nervous system countless times a minute is asking a single question of the environment. And that single question is always, am I safe? So imagine you have an unconscious system that can be triggered like that. And it's constantly scanning the environment and every relationship. Behind the conscious awareness, it's saying, am I safe? Am I safe? Am I safe? And there's many things. I mean, I teach a whole training on this that will trigger the nervous system of your clients without you even being aware of it. Certain low tones, like, you know, that they can hear a truck outside, that is on high alert for your nervous system because it's an evolutionary thing, right? You know, think of it like this. If, when you hear a high-pitched yelp, our inclination and instinct as mammals is to turn towards it, right? Something is hurt. When you hear a low growl, our instinct is to bolt, is to run or freeze, right? Because we would have been eaten. Those are still at play, whether we realize it or not. There's certain, the vagus nerve is hooked into our ears, our facial muscles, so that the way that we can tell with each other in an interpersonal way when someone is regulated or not regulated by the vagus nerve is flat affect or monotone voice. So you want to be aware of that. You want to be aware to use prosody, tonality shifts in your work, and, you know, your facial expressions. Anyway, I could go on and on, but you can read more about it. polyvagal theory. It's a fascinating thing to begin to understand what's happening for our clients. A lot of times when you just explain to a client maybe who's gone through trauma or, you know, some type of, you know, abuse and is feeling shame over it, that this was not a conscious decision to not fight back. This was a biological necessity, and their unconscious system takes over. So anyway, I could go on and on. As I said, it's a really fascinating field to look into. So I'm going to share three things actually, that will downregulate the vagus nerve. And it's really good and really simple for you to share with your clients. So the first one that I had forgotten and was reminded of is the jaw dropping. So this one isn't pretty, but it works. So take a moment and relax your jaw. When you feel you've relaxed it as much as you can, relax it even more. Like let it hang open. At a certain point, you're going to feel a downshift. Some of you will reach for a deep breath like I just did. It's just a quick cheat of how to relax the whole vagus nerve. So do it again. And what are you noticing? It's a weird one, but it's a quick cheat. If anybody wants to share what that was like. Feels weird but good. Yes, I feel sleepy. Because it immediately takes down and puts you into parasympathetic response. Yeah, I want to move my jaw too. Yep. And I yawned, and that is a very common thing. Shoulders drop. So you see, it's a very quick cheat, right? Here's another really quick cheat. Everybody with me, take a deep breath in. Now exhale twice as long. And another one. And exhale twice as long. And one more. That is another very quick way to downregulate the vagus nerve. Make the exhalation twice as long as the inhalation. Stephen Porges says, you know, some things that will immediately downregulate the vagus nerve are playing a woodwind instrument, oming, singing. Why? Because what do these have in common? The exhale is much longer than the inhale. So what was that one like? The shoulders really dropped. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, people don't realize how much tension they hold in their jaw. And just to get back to the jaw dropping, one of the things I say in my little book is when you think about how metaphoric we are with our body, right? And you realize that when people talk about a jaw dropping experience, or when they say my jaw dropped, they're never talking about anxiety. Mm. They're almost always talking about a moment of like awe. Think about awe. Or breathtaking moment. We're all talking about the same thing, right? Isn't that, I love that stuff.
That's beautiful. The jaw drop is the thing that absolutely 1,000% I do every single night. And now I'm conditioned to do it. So I would do the bilateral stimulation at the end of the bed, and then I would lay down in my pillow. And as soon as my head hit the pillow, I would relax my jaw. And I would find myself sleeping with my mouth open, but I think the clenching was one of the things that was causing insomnia.
Yeah.
Clenching was sending the signal that I was in distress. And my
Yep.
body wasn't, the feedback loop was, there's distress, you shouldn't be sleeping right now. And so the jaw drop was key for me. I still do it, and now I don't even have to think about it. It's become just completely unconscious.
Yeah. Well, think about it, right? So what is as I said, the vagus nerve is hooked into all of this, right? And that's why, we're scanning the environment through what we see and what we hear, right? And that will tell the body how to respond. But also how the body is responding will tell our brain what to do. So that tension says, okay, there's a threat here.
Mm.
And why would you go to sleep if there's a threat? So it's another way of doing that. Now, the longer exhalation is another trick. When I work with people that have like fear of public speaking, things like that, one of the tricks that I share with them is make your opening line a longer sentence, because that serves the same purpose of exhaling twice as long. And you'll notice it, right? A lot of times people do the opposite. They think somehow by keeping it short, they're getting through each sentence, so they'll be like, hi, I'm so-and-so.
Yeah, that's a great.
And I'm happy to see you here today. And here's what we're going to talk. And what they're doing is working against their own nervous system. So instead, I teach them to get up there, take a deep breath in, and then say, hi, my name is so-and-so. I'm so happy to see you all today. I have a few things I'm going to share. And you literally speak till you run out of air so that they can't have that same anxiety. It's just my whole, life in this field is, how do I make things faster, easier? Like, where's the cheat? I read polyvagal theory and I'm like, how can I cheat? I work with New Yorkers, so everything has to happen in under a New York minute.
I just want to remind you, you said 3 ways to downregulate the vagus nerve. So we did
those
drop,
are 2.
right, and the exhale twice as long.
And now heart breathing. How are we on time? What time is it?
We're good. It's 11:51. So if we finish up with heart breathing, and then we can answer some questions and
you got it.
Follow up.
So this one actually is another cheat I took from Heart Math, which is, some interesting people in California are studying heart rate variability and how that hooks into our brainwave state. And because the heart is the strongest emitter of electromagnetic energy in the body, it literally can entrain the brain to slow down. What they don't mention, and it's just me because I read all these different fields, is that this is also an interesting way to downregulate the vagus nerve. So take a moment, everybody. Close your eyes and focus your mind on your heart. And I'm about to sound pretty Californian, so bear with me. There's some good science behind it. As you focus on your heart and breathe, I want you to imagine breathing through your heart. And some people will imagine energy kind of moving in, moving out as they breathe. Some people will visualize that stream of energy moving in and out through their heart. Some people just focus their mind around their heart as they breathe, and some people can even hold their hand over the area where their heart is to keep their focus there. Now your mind will wander, it usually does, so just bring it back to the heart and breathe. And anytime your mind wanders, you bring it back to the heart and breathe. And back to the heart and breathe. And whether you're visualizing the energy moving in, moving out, or just focusing on the area around your heart, anytime your mind wanders, you just gently bring it back to your heart and breathe. And that was probably about a minute. So open your eyes and notice how you feel. Just take a moment and notice your body. Notice what's happening for you. Amy, oh my God, I'm so calm. Is there a way to access the previous workshops? What, I'm not
I'll
sure what.
take care of that. I'll respond to that person privately.
Oh, okay.
Tired and sad. That's interesting.
Hmm.
What would you say about that?
So first, I mean, I always follow the unconscious mind, right? So we are, think of the metaphor of the heart, right? The poets had it right. One of the things that's interesting is, your heart. I teach how we have three brains, actually more really, but the three main brains are the one in your head, the one in your heart, and the one in your gut. All of them have neurons and make neuropeptides. Your gut makes, I think, almost 90% of your serotonin. Well, your heart also helps to make some oxytocin. I love that, right? That's the bonding chemical. That's the love chemical. And so the poets really have had it right. So, we're all going through crazy times. And when you're focusing on your heart and your breathing, that metaphor is embodied. And some people feel more open or joyous. Now, what I would do with you if you were in my office is first we could explore that a little bit. Where is that sadness? And let's drop right to the center of it. And what is it trying to tell you, or drop through it? What's underneath? I have a bunch of maneuvers there. But what I would say to you now is when you're doing the heart breathing, think of someone you love. Think of something that brings you joy. And then as you're breathing, you're starting to kind of resonate. You're starting to bring that different emotional configuration into the brain, into the mind, into the body. I collect ridiculous moments in my mind, like things that make me laugh out loud. I am one of those that will sit there with YouTube watching silly dog cat videos or slapstick stuff. And as soon as something makes me really laugh out loud, it's almost like my brain goes, and I take a picture of it.
Love it.
So it becomes a file in my system whenever I need, oftentimes if I shift out, before I come back in, I'll imagine my daughter's face in that goofy moment, or that other funny thing that made me laugh hysterically. And so when I land, right, so you go into neutral, you want to directionalize landing, right, emotionally, if you need it. And that's where I would call upon. For me, laughter is my resource. It's a doorway out. So for you, if you're doing heart breathing, I would say directionalize the landing. Think of someone or something you love, and that'll help. Okay.
I'm coming back on.
Hi.
So everybody, tell Melissa what you thought. So we learned a lot of different things, and I know your toolkit is huge. You have hundreds of different
20 some odd years worth of gathering.
oh
I'm a hunter and gatherer.
I love it. Well, I can give you my testimony, and it has helped me tremendously, and I'm forever grateful to you. I think we just scratched the surface of what we can be doing for ourselves here. I want to encourage you all to add 1, 2, 3, 4, or all of these things to your own toolkit. You will definitely share them with your clients if you find they've helped yourself, right? So I know bilateral stimulation is part of my whole spiel, and I use heart math actually and heart breathing. I love.
Okay, excellent.
So I just want to encourage you as therapists to take care of yourselves as well by maybe shifting focus off of how you can use this with your clients and just make a commitment to practice this with yourself, right? I will tell you, you will feel calmer, you will feel more grounded, your body and your mind will thank you, and your heart. right? If you have any questions, please email me to Dana@Rockstar Practice. If you can't remember that, it's in the email that I sent you with the link to this meeting. And if there's any questions I don't have answers to, I will reach out to Melissa and get them for you.
Yeah, if you want to, if you have any questions or you've used this and found an interesting variation you want to share with me, you could just, my name, melissatiers.com. And that's where my email is. And you can just, Tiers, Tiers.
Just put it in the
There we go. And this way, just if that's, sometimes I learn a lot when people say, hey, I was doing this with a client and the client did this. And I'm like, huh. And then I immediately test it because I'm weird that way. So if you have any questions, feel free to shoot me an email. I ain't going anywhere.
Great. Thank you so much, Melissa, for sharing your time and expertise with us today.
My pleasure.
Thank you to all of you who spent an hour with us today. I hope you got something very fruitful out of it, and we look forward to seeing you at some of our future workshops. Have a beautiful day.
Excellent. Be well, everybody. Now go wash your hands.
Thanks, Melissa.
Bye-bye.